Hi, I'm Julie Thompson. Welcome to the Plymouth Select Board candidate interview. I want to take a moment to thank our candidate for participating in this interview and collaborating with PACTV to bring this informational programming to residents and voters this election season. Let me explain the format. We will be conducting a one-on-one interview-style Q&A format with each candidate, lasting at the most 45 minutes. Responses will not be timed, and follow-up questions may be asked during this format. We aim to ask up to 5 questions, but that will depend on the length of the responses, along with any follow-up discussion during this exchange. Candidates will be allowed to address anything not covered or that they would like to add clarification to at the end of the interview in their closing remarks. Let's get started. Today we're speaking with Wrestling Brewster, one of the 6 candidates for 2 seats for the Plymouth Select Board in the Plymouth Town election. Wrestling, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Okay, we are going to start right into the questions, and they're not timed, so we'll talk as long as we need to talk, okay? First one is about capital expenses and budgeting. Every year, budgets are prepared, debated, recalculated, and finally presented to town meeting for approval. Salaries and benefits, town-owned buildings, and ongoing capital expenditures are often debated, and there are always projects or initiatives that do not get funded every year. The Select Board is required to review the annual and the capital budgets. What parameters do you use in determining which budgetary items you will support and which you will not?
Wow. And when it comes to the budget, one of the things that it's interesting, because I've been in the legislative body for over 10 years, and we get the budget at the end, and we're not privy to half the information about budgets. And running for selectman, I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to the town manager. I've talked to a lot of finance people. You know, I've always talked to Lynn, but really delving into the budget and to different projects. I think one of the things that we really need to do is we need to sit down with Lee Hartman, the director of planning, and we need to decide where we want to be in 20 years. And that will determine what we want to do in 10 years, 5 years, what we need to do tomorrow. And I think that's where we should start with the budget. I think we need to really say, you know, that this is where we want to be and this is how we're going to get there. And that determines what the budget things. You know, you prioritize things, and capital decides where those are prioritized. But I think that something that we need to do, we need to look at, it used to be called the DO report, it's something else now, but it's a program that the DPW has that prioritizes and says, in 5 years, this roof's going to collapse, or, you know, we need to do this to this building. I think we need to really look at those things, and we need to come up with a better budget. I think we need to act like it's our money and it's our budget, like a household budget, that we're sitting there going, where do we want to be in 5 years? Do we want to be independent? Do we want to, you know, still have buildings falling apart? We need to prioritize better. I think that's when the budget comes up.
So right now, the budget starts with the Select Board, and
Yep.
then it goes to Advisory and Finance.
Yep.
And then they do whatever they need to do with it, and then
Yep.
they will weigh in on it, Select Board weighs in on it, and then it goes to town meeting, right?
Yep.
Now, you said, you know, we should be doing this ahead of time with to do with planning. Now, what about the 10-year plan? What about the town's 10-year plan?
The master plan?
Yeah.
Master plan that we spent a whole bunch of money on and put on the shelf?
I thought that was brought back up.
Yes, it is brought back up. It is, again, being in the legislative body, this is where our form of government right now, the legislative body really is not involved and doesn't know the things that are going on. You know, when I've been involved for a number of years, and I keep saying, oh, what about the master plan? And in sitting down with Lee says, well, there's a lot of stuff that we do towards the master plan, and we are looking at the master plan. I think that master plan, we're creating a new master plan, which we need to do. Again, I think that we, as a community, need to be involved in that master plan. And the master plan committee is going to have, you know, a lot of civic involvement. But I think we really need to buy into that. You know, that we have these master plans that, you know, I don't know what the master plan is. You know, I've never seen it. I've been in government for, you know, 10 plus years. And I think that to have buy-in, we need to decide what we want to be and where we want to go and how to get there.
And so right now, you're you're one of the town meeting members.
Yes.
Okay, so what kind of intel do you, as a group, get about the budget before it goes to town meeting?
There's two types of town meeting members. There's town meeting members who are involved throughout the year. They're checking up on things. They're watching FinCom meetings. They're watching the select board meetings. And then there's some who they find out about the budget when they get that budget book. So we're not involved in the process at all. And we're given that book. And if we pay attention, if we're watching every FinCom meeting and every other meeting, okay, that's why they made that decision. And when we come to town meeting and we're asked to vote on a $280 million budget, some of us are kind of informed, some of us are not. And I think that's part of the problem is that the legislative body needs to be involved in that process, needs to know, because there's a fair amount of people who believe that FinCom makes the budget, gives it to the select board. No, the select board makes the budget and gives it to FinCom, and then they look at it. And that's, I think, part of the problem of where we are is that that budget is huge. And we're asking people to make it. It always is the biggest, I hate the word the joke, but it's always the biggest joke of town meeting that we spend 45 minutes to an hour on band uniforms. We spend 5 minutes on warrant 9, which is usually millions of dollars. And it's always hard for me to say, shouldn't we discuss this a little more?
So as if you were elected to the select board, what process would you suggest so that more involvement could be happening along the way with all the town meeting members?
With town meeting members? And I think that's an interesting subject, and it gets into the charter and it gets into different forms of government. I think that there needs to be better communication and better relationship with COPC and the select board, because I think it's confrontational right now and it's very divided and divisive. And I think that COPC was built as the arm of of town meeting that's involved 365 days out of the year, not just at town meeting.
And COPC is the Committee of Precinct
Committee of
Chairs,
Precinct
for anyone who
Chairs.
doesn't know.
Right.
That's the chair of each precinct.
Yes,
Gets
which is
together and they have
elected
another
from the
group.
precinct,
Yep.
which is elected
Okay.
from the public.
Okay. So you would get
Better involvement.
Far more involvement,
Better
yeah.
involvement because it's when we're talking about these huge budgets, one of the things that the community really is not happy about is here's the select board that builds this budget. They're involved in the budget, they make these decisions, and here's a legislative body that's really not involved in that process till 0 hour at town meeting floor when they get to discuss it and talk about it.
Okay. So if you get elected, you might be able to do something about that. Okay.
God willing.
We'll go on to number 2, infrastructure. The town of Plymouth is massive in area, as we all know. Infrastructure integrity is a complicated subject and includes the sourcing and delivery of water, the collection and transport of sewage, the upkeep of roads and bridges, just to name a few. What do you think are Plymouth's greatest challenges with its current infrastructure?
Wow. Again, I would say planning, and I think that the public continually asks me, how did we get here? And when you ask officials, they all say somebody else, I just got involved in this. I think water is huge, and right now we have concerns about amount, quality, and pressure. And we're trying to deal with that pressure in West Plymouth that we've got. And we're trying to, look at the quantity, and conserve and do the best we can. and quality. And I think all three of them, if we had more control of our land, of the unused land, I think that we could solve a lot of those. I don't think we're going to completely solve them ever, but I think water's a huge thing. And I think that we need to be better planners.
So what do you mean by control of unused land? Who's we, and what would we do with that unused land? Who owns it? What is it?
Yep. So there's a lot of talk about land banks and discussion about if, I think that when it comes to water quality, there's a lot of land near waterways and over our aquifer that is clear cut, is not used to the best ability. If we started looking at the future and saying, all right, here's a parcel of land, that's prime real estate. Recently, we bought a pond off of we bought a entire cranberry bog because that cranberry bog owner had a pond that was sucking water out of our aquifer. So that's a good step. That's a good step of saying, if we had control over that land, there's always the balance of commercial, industrial, homeowner, and open space. And that's any community has that problem.
Right.
I think we have a good problem because we have a lot of land. I think that we're very poor landlords and very poor planners when it comes to land. If you go back and you look at, you really need to ask the question, why did Cisco go to Plimpton? Cisco went to Plimpton because they had pad ready, they were ready to go, they were really nice to them. And I think that's where we really need to look to the future, and we need to do better planning and say, look, strategically, this parcel of land right here, we need to buy that. And we need to buy that, or we need to have access to that so that we can control that land. Better control of our land. We've got a lot of land in Plymouth, and if we had better control of it, we can decide, yeah, this needs to go to current use. Well, this really needs to be used because our aquifer is right on top of it, and I think that we could be better planning as opposed towards land.
Okay. All righty, let's go to question 3, the proposed charter. After many months of meetings, input, and analysis, a duly elected group of Charter Commission members finalized their suggested changes to the town of Plymouth's existing charter. Whether or not to adopt this new charter will be on the ballot on May 20th. Will you be voting yes or no on the adoption of this charter, and why?
I think that right now we're looking, it's another thing that's become so divisive and so divided of the town. And there are the no people who have come up with a whole bunch of money to say, no, don't vote for this. And I think there's the people, full disclosure, I'm a member of the Charter Commission. And I knew on election night, I wasn't going to get what I felt was the best form of government for the town of Plymouth. But what I set out to do is say, all right, what can I get what the Plymouth is demanding? What the citizens told us when we were collecting those 7,000 signatures. This is how they feel about the government. This is where the government fails. How can we make it better? One of the things that all 9 commissioners agreed with is town meeting needs to be put on the operating room floor. We can't have these minor tweaks. As charter reviews have tried in the past, they have done little minor tweaks. We all agreed we need some major tweaks on this. We need to sit it on the operating room floor and take it apart and find out what the best thing and find what the worst thing is. What I would say to the town of Plymouth is fight for your democracy. Get out and vote.
Well, you voting yes or no? That's the question.
It's a good question.
And I need you to answer. 'Cause I know you're going to either vote yes or no. So.
I had an interesting conversation this afternoon with one of the residents, and he called me up and he goes, "Are you voting for this or not?
Yeah.
I know you're on the commission.
Yeah.
I'm concerned." And what he said is, it doesn't matter what form of government we have, it's all who's governing and how they're going to govern. And he goes, I really don't feel confident with how they've been governing. And he said, I'm going to vote for this because I want change. And I think if push comes to shove, I'm probably going to vote for this. I don't think it's going to pass because the no people have a lot more money and a lot more PR than the commission or anybody who's voting yes. I think the most important thing is that as citizens, we need to look at this charter. We need to stop arguing about how much it's going to cost and the little nitpicky things. What we need to do is sit down and say, okay, we had a great discussion in the beginning of Committee of Precinct Chairs last Thursday, where one of the members says, okay, Mr. Brindisi, town manager, you're saying that this charter is going to cost a whole bunch of money, but a bunch of the stuff that you've mentioned, you've talked about in the past as somewhere down the road, we need this. And Mr. Brindisi said, yeah, a lot of the stuff in the charter is something we need. Charter's demanding it. And I said, great, let's have this discussion. Let's see, okay, a third town manager, a third assistant town manager is something that Derek said that he would need with this charter. Gee, he's been asking that for a while. Let's sit down and talk about that and stop talking about, all right, it's going to cost $1.9 million. Okay.
But isn't that a legitimate question?
It is.
Will
it is a great
will it cost
question.
more money? Yeah.
Yes, it's a great question.
It's a legitimate question. Yeah.
It's a great question. I think that, again, we need to figure out what we want to be as a town. We want to figure out how we're going to govern ourselves. But we need to have the good discussions about, okay, and the no people I've sat down with, and they said, look, there's some really good stuff in here, but there's some really bad stuff. And how do we even that out? That's the discussion we need to have.
But we can't really have that until it's either passes or it doesn't pass, right? Because it has to pass in totality. You can't, right. You vote for either the whole thing or you vote not to adopt the whole thing. We stay where we are, and then whatever happens next, happens next. Right. But so are you a yes vote or a no vote when you go to the ballot?
If push comes to shove, I'm a yes vote.
Okay.
Because I think this forces us to look at our government and say, okay, can this really work for a bordering on 70,000 people, a $280 million budget? Is this the government that can take care of that? I continually hear that this charter, if passed, puts a lot of pressure on our part-time volunteer government. And I said, wow, that's a discussion we really should have. Is, okay, you're talking about your part-time volunteer government.
Which is all your boards and committee members.
All your boards and committee members and your town meeting members and all of that. And I think that it's when you are looking at something like this charter, which has become very divisive, it's split. And you always, a great man who was one of my mentors when I was going through a bunch of different things where I was a leader at different points, he said, have the discussion, because I'd always be, we shouldn't have this discussion because it's, about this. Let's have this discussion.
But didn't you have lots of discussions during this whole, when you this charter commission had well over a year?
3 years.
Lots of meetings, lots of discussions, so you got input from a lot of people.
Yes, we did. I wish we had more. I wish that a lot of the people who are so against this, I wish they had come to the meeting. I know that they weren't met friendly by the commission early on, and that's one of the things I continually reminded my fellow commissioners of. We got to listen to everybody. If you don't like what they say, thank you very much for your input.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that I learned about myself is I think I have that ability to sit down with these people. I was 2 against 7, and I was able to sit down, and you asked the fellow commissioners, they said, wow, wrestling, I really felt, okay, wrestling is going to say no on everything. We had great discussions, and I think that's that's something in government that we need to get back to, is having those discussions and saying what's best for Plymouth. You know, okay, yeah, it's expensive, and anything we change to is going to cost us some money. But what's the good stuff? What's the bad stuff? And let's dig down deep and have those discussions.
All right. And there's a lot of talk about this, and there's a lot of forums going on. There's a lot of meetings going on. So the voters really, and a lot of voters don't understand it. And it is complicated.
That's the people we need to reach.
Exactly. They really need to understand. Their questions need to be answered so that they can make a decision. Yes or no. What do they think?
And I would say to those people, get the facts. And it's I'm continually saying, okay, is this fact or fiction?
Well, or
if it's on Facebook,
you know,
it's not something you should look at. You know, and I think, you know, Harry Helm came to the COPC last Thursday, and he said we should really sit down and have a good discussion about this. You know, with facts. Not yelling and screaming like we're doing now. And I thought that was great. And it's hard to get people together like that, because I think the Charter Commission says, look, we've done 2 years of work.
Right.
Here we are.
Yeah.
This is what
a lot
we
of
got.
work. A lot of work went into this.
A lot of work.
Absolutely.
And this is where we are, and this is what we've got.
Yeah.
And I think the no people are like, well, we think it's terrible because of this. And I think, frankly, I think they're exhausted after 2 years. And it's like, okay, you know, I think that Harry's right. We should sit down, but I think that it should be a fact-driven thing where it's like, oh, these are the facts, and this is, you know, what we feel, and this is what you feel.
Okay, all right. Okay, question number 4 is about economic development and tourism. Tourism and economic development are crucial aspects of Plymouth's current and future financial health. What priorities do you place on these areas, and what are the drawbacks that concern you?
Economic development and tourism?
Yep. The 2 big, huge subjects.
Yep. I think they're both huge. I think economic development is something that we need to work really hard on, because I think that when I met with the town manager recently, and I said, you know, what do you think about economic development? Where can we go? How can we get there? And he said, Wrestling, we've got a bad PR problem. You know, commercial companies that he talks to say, wow, Plymouth, it's tough. Tough to get in there, tough to get anything done. We're not welcomed with, you know, grateful hands. And you don't want to give away the store. But I think we need to look at certain areas and say, okay, can we put, you know, industrial here? Can we can we get some economic development here? And again, I think it goes back to that having control of land. You know, we're coming up on the Holtec property that, you know, there's a lot of discussion about it. And
What is your opinion on that?
about the Holtec property? I think that if I had a Wayback Machine, we'd go back and we'd say, before Holtec even bought it, you know, we're a de facto storage dump. There's a lot of property there, and I think that Holtec's this big honking company that they've got all the marbles. They don't need to deal with us. They don't need to give us first refusal. I think that it's an important part. I'd love to see another industrial zone in some of that land. I'd like to see a lot of it, you know, open space and you know, some development there. I think it's an important property that we need to pay attention to, and I think that the selectmen need to keep on that. I think Holtec is Holtec's sitting there and saying, okay, well, you know, we're not having a pilot anymore, so how about we pay you X amount and we'll give you a great deal and first refusal on that property.
And a pilot, for anyone who doesn't know, is payment in lieu of taxes. Okay.
Which we used to have for many, many years with the nuclear plant. And then we don't have that anymore. And it's, getting back to the original question, I think economic development and tourism are two totally different things. And I think that it's something we really need to work on, and we need to look towards the future. We need to find out how we can be a little more friendly, how we can have, the 1,000 acres down in Wareham. It's something we should have looked at 10 years ago. If we had looked at it 10 years ago and got lawyers on that, we'd know who to charge taxes to and who owns that property.
So let me ask you, when you said tourism and economic development are two very separate things, what about the convention center? Now, the convention center that is being talked about, and I know there's a study done, and we received some money to do that study, the town did. That would be a driver of, obviously, economic development, because people would come here, but it would also help tourism, because they come here, they're not just going to stay at the convention center, they're going to take advantage of all the wonderful things that are in this area. So is that an example of something that you would be behind?
Yeah, I think that I know the General Mayflower Society has a huge membership, and whenever they have their annual meeting, they go to Brockton because they haven't got anything here that can hold them, that can contain that. I think a convention center is something we should definitely look at, and it's that balance, I think that, again, we need to start planning, and we need to decide what we want to be as a town. I hate to say it, we're not that little quaint town anymore. We're 70,000 people and a $280 million budget. And it's, I've got residents saying, my taxes went up, $2,000 in the last 2 years. And what are you going to do about it? And I have to say to them, I think we really need to look at different ways of getting economic development, and I think tourism is the reason I say it's two totally different things is because tourism, we need to get people here, and we need them to spend money here, and we need to stay in the hotels and go to all the museums and go to all the events, and then go home and tell everybody, wow, I had a great time in Plymouth.
Right.
And that takes money, that takes infrastructure, that takes all of the things that takes away from everything else. And we need to spend some money on tourism. And I think that, where that money comes from is then you go back to economic development. Gee, if we had some more economic development, we could have some more, of the economic stirring that we need.
What types of industries would you want to see brought here to Plymouth, strictly for a base of
I think universities are a great draw. I think a convention center is something that the problem is that major corporations, if they come here, they want to be able to house their employees. And they can't. They're looking at affordable housing, and they're saying, "Wow, if I bring my workforce here, they're going to have to go somewhere else to live." And the whole point of bringing it here, and I think it's a lot of planning and a lot of looking at, like I said, if we look in the future and we say this is where we want to be, all right, how do we get there? How do we get there? I really want to sit down with Lee Hartman and I want to say, Lee, if we want to be here in 20 years, what do we do? How do we plan that? How do we get there? And if you do that situational planning, you can sit down there and say, okay, tomorrow we need to do this. If we want to get there, we're going to have to spend money here. And every time you spend money here, you do something there, it affects there and it affects there. It's I think that I'm continually asking our economic people and our leaders, how did we get here? How did we get where all our buildings are falling down? How did we get where, everybody doesn't want to come to Plymouth anymore? How did we get here, and how do we stop that and work towards a better Plymouth?
Okay. And one other question on the tourism is the cruise line.
Yep.
The small cruise line that will be able to come into our harbor as of this summer.
New T Wharf.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what is your thoughts on that?
I'm actually on the Harbor Committee, which has looked at this. I think that we need to, again, it's a balance, because we have a very busy harbor where we have a lot of recreation going on, but we also have a lot of business. We're the third largest lobstering community in Massachusetts. That's up there with New Bedford. That means that a lot of lobsters and a lot of fish and everything else is coming through that wharf. And I think that the fishermen and the lobstermen in that community is really afraid, okay, this boat's going to come in and it's going to take up that T wharf. And how's that going to affect us? And I think that I'd love to see this cruise line come in. I think it would be awesome for the town of Plymouth. I think we need to work with all the entities to come to, okay, we're going to be, you're going to be inconvenienced for an hour while they bring it in. They're going to be 2 days where they're, in Plymouth and they're working with Plymouth. And I think it'd be great. I think we need to work with all the entities to get it to happen.
Okay. All right. Let me give you the fifth question. A broad field of candidates. There are 6 individuals running for 2 3-year terms on the Select Board. Each brings a different set of experiences and history. Given that one of the Select Board's general powers and duties is to adopt policy directives and guidelines, how do you balance your own viewpoints and biases to serve the greater good for the entire town?
That's a great question. I would go back to the Charter Commission. And if you ask the Charter Commission people about me, they say, wow, he was able to sit there as the underdog, listen to all the things and bring them together. And I think what we need to do as a community and as a government, I'm really excited to work with someone like Derek. I think Derek, Brindisi, the town manager, is someone who, when I first met him, he said, wrestling, one of my philosophies, I never want to hear we've never done it or we've always done it this way. I want to look at it and say, how do we do it? How do we do it the best we can possibly do? He said, I want to retire in this community. And by that point, I want it to be great. I want it to be thriving. How we get there is, again, we need to decide what we want to be as a town. We need to listen to our community. And I think that's part of the government that we've lost, is we stop listening to the community, because the community hears, we know better than you do. You're not smart enough to understand this. I think we need to listen to the community, and we need to bring all those ideas together and come up with a great future.
Who's saying to the community, you're not smart enough to understand this? Where is that message being delivered, or how is that message being delivered?
I think our government has a really bad PR problem right now.
The government?
The government of Plymouth.
The whole government of Plymouth?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that from the top down. Because when we were collecting those 7,000 signatures, we talked to the community, and our lead-in was, how do you feel about the town of Plymouth's government? And a high percentage of them said, I don't trust them. I don't feel they're working for me. I don't feel they listen to me. I feel that they're saying, you just need to sit over there and we'll get it done. So that's the PR that they're getting. And I know a lot of people would say, well, that's not true. If you're looking at the perception, and what I say to these people is, okay, why aren't you fighting for your democracy? Why are we still at 10% coming out to vote?
Yeah, voting, yeah.
Get out and vote. And one of the things I keep saying to them is, if you're so concerned about your taxes, why do you keep voting for people who aren't? You need to get somebody in the government who's going to listen to you, bring your voice to them, and say, okay, yeah, this is a good idea. Town doesn't want it. Or, gee, we've got, what I've watched over the last couple of years is there's a percentage of people that are starting to pay attention. It started with Bump Rock Road. When Bump Rock Road had that problem where a developer wanted to break the covenant.
And what
And
was the covenant? Just for anyone who doesn't know what the
the
story
covenant
is.
was an agreement with the town that they would only be able to put up a certain amount of house lots because they didn't want it overdeveloped.
Okay.
It's in Chiltonville. It's a wooded area.
Yep.
The community, agreed with the town
Yep.
that they wouldn't overbuild here. So a developer who has some land there wanted to put up a bunch more houses, went to the planning board and said, we want you to break that covenant because the covenant was with the planning board. So I got a call from a bunch of concerned, citizens, and they said, what do we do? And I said, call Bill Cohane, call Betsy Hall, call all the environmental people, get as many people as you can. And they stacked the meeting. This was during COVID, so it was all online. But I got called from planning board members wrestling, what did you do? I've got 80 people wanting to talk at the planning board meeting. I said, they're paying attention. You should pay attention to them. And from that moment on, I noticed that there's a higher percentage of people who are saying, I was at a meeting with them, with that group last week, and I said, you guys started it. You started saying, whoa, wait a minute. It's our town. We're not happy about this, and we're going to tell you about it. People started going to public comment at the select board meeting. And I think the select board meeting, the select board was surprised, because people started paying attention. And people like Cirque started saying, hey, this is costing us millions of dollars. And the select board's like, well, yeah, okay. And I think they tried to shut down that public comment with, you're wrong and this is why you're wrong. Public comment should be, thank you for your comment. I'll take it up with the town manager and he'll get you the facts. So I think that we need more community involvement. I think we need leaders who are able to listen to everybody and come back and say, this is the best idea.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so in the last 5 minutes or so, why don't you speak directly to the camera, and you can talk about this one over here. Anything we didn't talk about, anything you want to clarify, and just kind of put your piece out there for why people should vote for you.
Okay. I'd just like to say I'm wrestling Brewster, and I'm a lifelong resident of Plymouth, descended from William Brewster. And something that the Pilgrims brought to these shores was a government made up by the people for the people. And I think that's what we need to get back to. I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of our government. Spending 10 years on the legislative branch and watching that legislative branch have a lack of power and a lack of understanding, I'm starting to get to understand. I'm starting to talk to people like Lee Hartman and the town manager, and a lot of the stuff that I've been trying to get, we're doing, but I didn't know about it. I think that our government needs better PR, and I want to work on that. I want to work on community involvement, where the town residents feel confident with their government, that their government's working for them and working for the future. I really want to start planning. I'm continually on town meeting floor saying, how did we get to the point where our buildings are falling apart and we didn't know about it? How did we get to an HVAC system that nobody changed the filters on and we have to replace because we don't have anybody paying attention? And I want to be that guy that's working for you, working for the residents of Plymouth to create a better government and a better future for Plymouth so that we don't have to worry about it. If we start planning and we all get on board, then we're not going to have surprises and we're going to have a better future. I want to be that person for the town of Plymouth. I want to work hard for you, and I want you to talk to our government. I want you to have the confidence in our government that we used to have. And I would appreciate your vote on May 20th, Wrestling Brewster. Thank you.
Thank you, Wrestling. Thank you for participating in this interview. We wish you the best luck throughout the campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of this interview, please visit our website, PACTV.org, for replay times and online viewing options, including PACTV's on-demand and streaming service, PACTV Prime. And please make your choices heard by voting in the election on Saturday, May 20th. Thank you and good day.